Katherine, and I live in Bristol. And I currently work part-time hours, and I work from home for a fully remote company. I remember that it was a very intense time in my work life where I was holding quite a responsible job for health and safety within a hotel. And we had to have annual audits where a company environmental health officer came into the hotel for 3 or 4 days and literally went through the hotel with a fine tooth comb, so to speak, and then would award us a sort of classification at the end of that. And the year before, we had got a really poor score. So I was feeling under intense pressure, and it really felt down to me, actually, to make sure that the hotel was ready for inspection, basically, around all the different areas that were needed to, in terms of complying with statutory health and safety law. So you get a sense of what that involved. And I remember being in the health club, leisure club, I think we called them in those days, with the EHO and feeling absolutely awful. I mean, I can still remember it now, just hideous headache. And I really felt like I was just going to blank out and fall in the pool. But I was sort of forcing myself. It didn't feel like I had any choice other than to continue to respond to the EHO's questions. And it was like the only thing that mattered was what score we got, and I didn't matter in any of that somehow. And that's partly just because I'm also can be a perfectionist, and because I wanted to do a good job, and because I've invested an awful lot in getting the hotel up to scratch, and I wanted that to be seen. I think when I then came into work, it was like someone had just pulled the plug out. And in order to get to my office, I had to go up a flight of stairs. And I just stood at the bottom of these stairs, and it was like my whole being had just turned to lead. And I could not muster. It was very scary, actually, because it was like I just couldn't find the juice to get up the stairs. I just couldn't. And it was also cognitive as well. So it was definitely a very physical thing, with pain, as I mentioned, the severe headaches, as well as just feeling like my brain couldn't process anything and then prioritize what needed to be done, which was quite a shock because, I was used to being quite competent and efficient. So it was literally, as I say, like the body went into shutdown. The fact that it was very hard to switch off after work, affecting sleep and so on. Being in a sort of state of perpetual heightened anxiety or agitation, even if not at work. And just a lot of preoccupation in the mind. Yeah, so it was pretty obvious, really, but not obvious to me at the time. A lot of pain, as I mentioned, and I guess, yeah, a combination of the fact that how I was and who I was at that time. I didn't have the awareness to sort of, the way I look at it now is like I never had a sense that actually rest mattered. I think I just very much thought of my body as a machine that was in service to me, to my will. And it was a huge shock when the body sort of fought back and just went, enough, can't do this anymore. And no act of will could override it. Well, it's obviously quite an isolating and scary experience. Fortunately, I wasn't the breadwinner, so I wasn't under that kind of anxiety at that time. Um, but it was a huge crush to my sort of identity and sort of sense of who I thought I was. I suddenly felt I didn't have anything I could really contribute that was going to be of any value to the world. So I did seek therapeutic support for psychological health, well-being, and yeah, just educated myself really about what I needed, and an adequate amount of rest was part of what I needed. Developing the tools to be able to move from a state of sort of being highly adrenalized and anxious into a state of calm and relaxation. So learning really practical tools about how to actually do that, and using things like apps that can help with certain practices to sort of guide, body scans, guidance, that kind of thing, just to help learn how to regulate the nervous system and actually get proper good quality rest. So that was a huge piece, which I continue with to this day. Learning about self-care, really, that like I said a minute ago, that to rest was okay. It didn't mean I had no value as a human being. Yeah, and that, when there were other changes like diet changes, in a way, lots of different elements that go up to making up a happy, healthy individual, really. It was like I had to rebuild that in very pragmatic terms. And the other thing that I really remember from was going to the GP, and her response actually was really surprising, because she said to me, "What if I was to say to you, what brings you joy? What would that be?" And my immediate response was to say dancing, which was just seemed an utterly absurd thing to say, given that I was completely fatigued and barely functioning. And she hit the nail on the head, because absolutely I needed to reclaim some pleasure and some joy and do things that fed me. So that's what I did. I needed to earn some money. I wanted to feel less isolated. I wanted to feel that I had something to contribute. I had to relearn that I still had something to give, that I still had capability. It was just that it wasn't going to look like it used to. And initially, the first role I had, on paper, it sort of seemed like it ought to be something I could do in terms of hours and the nature of the role. And it was, in the sense that it did fit my skill set, but the nature of the hours and the fact that it was an operational role, so I had to be there to respond to the phone ringing and clients coming in, meant it was more demanding and time dependent than I actually was able to fulfill. So, but I still did it for a couple of years. It still was something I did, but it was a steep learning curve. It's been and it continues to be a process of self-awareness, learning what I need, what conditions are supportive, what aren't, and not in a really tight, controlling kind of way, more in a sort of flexible way. So I've learned that it may be necessary on some occasions to respond to a business need that means that I might have some sense or symptom wise or aware that I'm overextending, but I know that I then need to put in place something after that to recalibrate, if you like, the fact that I've had to overextend. So it's not as black and white as no, I'm not doing that. It's more like I take responsibility for finding that balance between the demands of my role and what I need to prioritize and what it's reasonable for me to respond to. And then I take responsibility for how I put that into action, so to speak. So very much having that, and then so within that only comes from a place of self-care that I was talking about earlier, and self-valuing and psychological safety, you know, feeling like, oh yeah, I do matter, what I need matters, and in order to stay functioning well, to be of benefit in my role, I do need certain sort of building blocks. These are things that need, and it's nobody else's responsibility. That's my responsibility, because often they're things that people can't see. Because for all intents and purposes, I look like it's fine, but actually, as I just demonstrated, when I actually hit burnout, you know, actually I'm feeling really awful and like I'm about to collapse. But in terms of what's actually going on objectively, it's very hard for anyone around me to see that. So I have to take accountability for that. And part of that is a communication and being able to be clear. And that's a constant learning experience, how to articulate what I need in a way that's helpful, that the other person, whether that's a colleague or whether that's a line manager, can actually hear what I'm asking for and feel it, experience it as a request rather than a demand, and hear the genuine reasons why it matters. So I can enlist their support in that process. And as I said, it's not fixed, it's changeable, and only I can take responsibility for that. Yeah, so around boundaries, being able to boundary and express that in a reasonable way, and work-life balance overall is a huge thing. So I now do value rest. I do value pleasure. I do value joy. I do value the need to engage socially, have activities outside of work. I love baking, and that's quite a low level thing to do. I say low level in terms of energy demand, but that's, you know, it's pleasurable. I enjoy doing it. So making space and making that space matter and sort of protecting that space. As I say, not in a rigid way, but just in a sort of, okay, I need, within my day, I need to sort of balance it all. So that's some of the things from myself, but I guess you'd like to know about more in terms of the relational with the work environment. Immediately to mind, just give them the benefit of the doubt. And I think what I mean by that is that there needs to be a willingness to take time maybe away from the work environment where you're, as in, I mean, sort of away from phones ringing and operational demands or something, but to have a conversation. And actually, I think most of that is about listening. Just it's having an attitude of a willingness to listen to what an employee might have to say or to share. And obviously, it's up to the employee about how much they want to disclose. And I think if that can be heard from a spirit of, as I said, that it's a request rather than a demand. It's like the employee is saying, okay, well, this is what I need, or I'm struggling with the fact that I get emails at 9 o'clock at night asking me to respond immediately. And that's having a detrimental effect on my family life or on my ability to sleep at night. So it's just being able to hear that and not necessarily then being able to sort of fix it, but getting into a conversation and a sort of consultation process with that person. And I guess, you know, trying to think a bit more creatively, perhaps, around what might be possible. So for me, with my current employer, I'm part of what I've been able to disclose is that actually I need to rest in the afternoon. And we've negotiated that I can do that. And then I work into the evening. So I'm effectively working a full normal working day, but I just take a period of time out during the day and I work into the evening. So it's just a process of consultation. And so receptivity, willingness to listen and to not make assumptions, I guess, about somebody. And actually, probably there are some very simple things that can be done. There's probably all sorts of, in that process of discussion that could come up that you could find a way to support the employee whilst also getting the needs of the business met. Well, I am. It's interesting. I am. Sometimes I do it at home rather than actually going out on a dance floor, but you know, that's all good. Yeah, and it feels like things, having said yes to that sort of to that mattering, pleasure mattering, and valuing that and having space in my life for that, more things are coming up. So I'm finding that actually writing is something I enjoy doing. Actually reading fiction, I mean, that's like, whoa, sitting down and actually reading a fiction book and having a fiction book sort of live, as it were, to dip in and out of. I mean, that is a huge change. And to do that, you know, without checking your emails at work or whatever, you know, it is around that work-life balance, definitely. But I would just add, the final thing I would just say is that where I've been incredibly fortunate is that the current employer very much has a culture of of health and well-being and genuinely caring about that. And that has made a huge difference because it's sort of woven into the fabric of how the company operates and then how they treat their employees. So, and I have been fortunate that I've got the sort of relationship with the line manager where I can say, you know, please don't ask me to do something last minute because it really stresses me out and has a really detrimental effect. And it doesn't mean that that doesn't happen, but it does mean that we've got an openness in our relationship where I can name that and within the limitations of the business needs, that can be responded to by the line manager.